The drilling rig shuddered as it bit through another layer of ancient ice. Foreman Vasquez wiped condensation from her helmet visor and checked the depth gauge. 37.8 kilometers beneath the surface of Sedna. Corporate expected results, and this expedition was already 2 weeks behind schedule. Coming up on another density anomaly, called Technician Morgan, his voice crackling through the comm, similar to the one we hit yesterday. Vasquez frowned. Yesterday's anomaly had cost them a drill head and 8 hours of recalibration. Ease off and scan it first. The massive drilling platform fell silent as Morgan directed ground-penetrating radar into the darkness below. The holographic display flickered to life, bathing the command module in ghostly blue light. "That's not ice," Morgan whispered. The scan revealed a perfectly symmetrical structure, a hexagonal chamber at least 50 meters across. The edges were too precise, the angles too perfect for any natural formation. "Get me a secure line to Earth," Vasquez ordered, her heart pounding. Corporate protocol was clear. All xenotech discoveries were to be reported immediately. The bonus would be substantial. The explosion came without warning. The drill head, despite being powered down, suddenly superheated and vaporized. The resulting shockwave ripped through the lower decks of the platform. Emergency bulkheads slammed shut as warning klaxons wailed. "Status," Vasquez shouted, picking herself up off the floor. "We've breached something," Morgan replied, blood streaming from a gash above his eye. "And it's responding." The deck beneath them vibrated with a rhythmic pulse, as if some massive machine had awakened. The scan display now showed energy readings spiking in patterns too regular to be random. "Corporate's going to want more than a report," Vasquez muttered, overriding the platform's emergency protocols. "They're going to want proof." Dr. Eleanor Chen ignored the sixth call from her department chair as she packed her meager belongings. After publicly defending her controversial thesis on prehistorical human technological achievement, her academic career was effectively over. No respectable institution would touch a scientist who claimed humans once possessed technology that exceeded current capabilities before mysteriously regressing. The call that finally came through wasn't from her university. "Dr. Chen." The voice was clipped, professional. "This is Director Harrington, Stellar Frontiers Corporation. We've uncovered something at our Sedna outpost that challenges conventional understanding." Eleanor's hand froze over the box of academic journals she'd been packing. "I'm listening." "We lost contact with the outpost 12 hours after they reported an artificial structure buried in the ice. Before communications failed, they transmitted partial scans that appear to contain writing." "What kind of writing?" Eleanor asked, her throat suddenly dry. "That's why I'm calling you, Doctor. It appears to be a variant of Proto-Sinitic script, exactly as your thesis predicted might exist in the Orc cloud." 6 hours later, Eleanor stood in Stellar Frontier's private launch facility, watching as technicians loaded her equipment into a ship that would reach Sedna in just under 2 weeks, a journey that should have taken years. "The transport uses proprietary drive technology," explained Harrington, a thin man with calculating eyes. "Developed from theoretical models our company acquired." "Stolen, you mean?" Eleanor replied. Harrington's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Let's just say certain governments don't have a monopoly on advanced research. Your academic colleagues might have ridiculed your theories, Dr. Chen, but private industry has been paying close attention." As Eleanor boarded the transport, a security officer handed her a tablet. "These are the last images transmitted before we lost contact." The screen showed the interior of what appeared to be a massive chamber, its walls inscribed with intricate patterns. In the center stood a pillar of dark material. Sprawled around it were the bodies of the drilling crew, their faces frozen in expressions of shock and wonder. There was no sign of violence, no indication of what had killed them. They looked as if they had simply stopped. And on the pillar, clearly visible despite the grainy quality of the image, was a symbol Eleanor had seen only in her most obscure research, a spiral galaxy with a line struck through it. The ancient human warning glyph for quarantine. The Security Council chamber fell silent as the holographic display activated, showing the 17 alien vessels now positioned in perfect formation near Saturn's rings. 5 days had passed since their unannounced arrival, and humanity's collective panic had barely begun to subside. "They're broadcasting again," announced General Santos, her weathered face illuminated by the tactical display. "Same message, but they're pushing it through every communications channel simultaneously. Civilian networks, military vans, even private emergency frequencies." Admiral John Way, hastily appointed commander of Earth's Unified Defense Forces, studied the alien flagship, a massive structure resembling a coiled serpent, its hull composed of overlapping metallic scales that pulsed with internal light. "Put it through," President Okafor ordered. The chamber screens flickered and resolved into the face of Admiral Zexfall. The alien commander's reptilian features might have been called elegant, if not for the cold calculation in its vertically slitted pupils. A translucent membrane swept across its eyes as it began speaking, its voice a harmonious multi-toned resonance that felt eerily pleasant despite the message it delivered. "Humans of Earth, your excavation of the Forbidden Archive constitutes a Class 1 violation of the Concordat of Contained Species. Return all acquired data and activation keys within 1 planetary rotation, or face immediate punitive action." "We've explained repeatedly that we don't know what keys they're referring to," President Okafor said after the transmission ended. "Dr. Chen, do you have anything new to report?" Eleanor Chen had barely slept since returning from Sedna. Her hair was disheveled, dark circles shadowed her eyes, but they burned with intensity as she stepped forward. "The archive data is far more extensive than we initially believed," she said, activating her own display. "It's not just historical records, it's schematics, activation protocols, orbital coordinates." She pulled up a 3-dimensional map of Earth, highlighting points beneath major cities. There are installations buried beneath Beijing, Lagos, London, Buenos Aires. Defensive systems that have been dormant for millennia. If these defenses exist, why haven't we detected them? General Santos asked skeptically. Because they're phase-shifted, existing partially outside our conventional reality. The archive contains protocols to bring them back into alignment. Admiral Way studied the data with narrowed eyes. "And you believe these are weapons? Left by our own ancestors?" "Not just weapons," Eleanor replied. "The archive suggests humans were once capable of manipulating fundamental forces, gravity, electromagnetic fields, even space-time itself." The chamber doors burst open as an aide rushed in, face pale. "Madam President, the Concorde vessels have just seized International Space Station Darwin. They're demanding immediate surrender of all archive data." The room erupted in shouts and arguments. President Okafor raised her hand for silence. "How many personnel are aboard Darwin?" 287, Madam President. Scientists, engineers, a dozen military personnel. The main screen flickered as an emergency transmission came through. The terrified face of Darwin's commander appeared. "They've breached the primary airlock." "There." His message cut off as a slender, chitinous limb wrapped around his throat. The last image before the transmission died showed something moving with impossible speed through the station's corridor. "We have no choice," Eleanor said quietly. "We need to activate the planetary defense grid." "That's exactly what they want us to do," countered the Chinese ambassador. "Prove we have these weapons so they can justify destroying us." "If we don't," Eleanor replied, "they'll kill everyone on that station to make a point." The decision became moot 30 seconds later, when Darwin exploded in a blinding flash visible from Earth's surface. All 287 souls aboard died instantly. Admiral Way turned to Eleanor, his face hardened into resolve. "Show me how to activate the Beijing node." 3 hours later, as the first Concorde vessels entered Earth's atmosphere over the Pacific, the planetary shield flickered into existence, a shimmering, geometric lattice of energy that surrounded the entire planet. Two alien ships, moving too quickly to alter course, struck the barrier and were sliced cleanly in half, their wreckage tumbling back into space in silent, flaming arcs. On every screen worldwide, Zexthal's next transmission displayed only 4 words. So the Worldbreakers return. The Martian sky burned crimson as Concord warships methodically demolished the colony's infrastructure. Screams echoed through emergency channels as atmospheric domes collapsed, venting precious air into the thin Martian atmosphere. 3 million colonists faced imminent death. Time to intercept, Admiral Wei demanded, standing on the bridge of the UES Defiance. Once a standard Earth orbital defense vessel, the ship now hummed with alien energies after its hasty retrofit with archive technology. 17 minutes, sir, his tactical officer replied. But sensors detect 32 Concord vessels in Martian orbit. Wei studied the tactical display, his expression grim. The Defiance was humanity's only combat-ready vessel, incorporating archive tech, a desperate prototype against overwhelming odds. Behind him, engineers worked frantically to interpret systems they barely understood. All hands, prepare for combat operations, Wei announced. Activate phase shift drive. The ship shuddered as reality seemed to bend around it. Stars blurred outside the viewports as the Defiance accelerated to speeds that should have been impossible, leaving ripples in spacetime itself. Beneath Europa's frozen surface, Eleanor Chen and her team raced through ancient corridors that had not seen human footsteps for 10,000 years. The facility had begun activating the moment they transmitted the archive's access codes, massive machinery awakening from millennia of dormancy. "We've got company," called Lieutenant Park, monitoring security feeds. Concord dropships, at least 5 of them, melting through the ice above us. "How long until the production systems are online?" Eleanor asked, interfacing with the facility's central computer. "Unknown," replied Dr. Matsuda, her xenotechnology specialist. "The system is running diagnostics and self-repair protocols. Could be hours, could be days." A distant explosion rattled ice from the ceiling. The Concord forces were getting closer. "We don't have hours," Eleanor said, making a decision. "I'm going to execute a full awakening protocol." Matsuda's eyes widened. The archive warned that could be dangerous without proper. "We're out of options," Eleanor interrupted, pressing her palm against an activation panel that seemed to recognize her DNA signature. The entire chamber hummed to life as holographic interfaces surrounded her. "Genetic authentication accepted," announced a voice speaking perfect, unaccented English. "Executive override acknowledged. Initiating emergency protocol." Resurrection. The chamber's floor became transparent, revealing a vast cavern below. Thousands of identical metallic pods extended into the darkness. As they watched, the pods began to open, unveiling sleek vessels of varying sizes, from single-pilot interceptors to massive capital ships. "My God," whispered Park, "it's an entire fleet." "Not just ships," Eleanor said, reading the data flowing across her interface. The archive didn't just store designs, it stored personalities. Combat intelligence matrices based on the greatest military minds of ancient humanity. The first vessel rose from its pod, a predatory craft of dark metal that seemed to absorb light. As its systems engaged, a communication request appeared on Eleanor's console. "This is Wing Commander Alessandra Kwan, 37 Voidhawk Squadron," came a confident female voice. "My last memory is of the battle at Proxima Centauri. Status report requested." Eleanor swallowed hard before responding. "Commander Kwan, you've been dormant for approximately 10,000 years. Humanity requires your assistance again." A pause. "Acknowledged. Combat ready. Awaiting orders." In Martian orbit, the Defiance emerged from its phase shift into the heart of the Concord fleet. Before the alien vessels could react, Wei ordered all weapons to fire. What followed defied expectations of everyone on both sides. The Defiance moved with impossible speed and precision, its weapons slicing through Concord shields as if they didn't exist. Advanced alien armor melted under concentrated energy beams that operated on principles human science had only theorized about. Target their flagship, Wei ordered, feeling strangely detached as his hands moved across control interfaces with muscle memory he shouldn't possess. The Defiance executed a maneuver that should have torn it apart, diving beneath a Concorde heavy cruiser while firing upward. The alien vessel split cleanly in half, its power core detonating in a brilliant flash that temporarily blinded Mars-facing sensors on Earth. "Sir," his communications officer called, voice filled with wonder. "We're receiving a transmission from Europa." Dr. Chen reports. "Reinforcements are coming." Wei allowed himself a grim smile as the Defiance banked sharply, evading a barrage of Concorde energy weapons. "Tell her to hurry. And inform Earth that Mars has not fallen, not while one human still draws breath." Above the red planet, 31 Concorde vessels converged on a single Earth ship that danced between their fire with impossible grace, a deadly preview of what was to come when the rest of humanity's forgotten arsenal awakened. The derelict hulls of Concorde battleships drifted silently through the void, a monument to 6 months of relentless warfare. Admiral Wei stood on the observation deck of the UES Retribution, a dreadnought-class vessel constructed in Europa's hidden shipyards, watching as his fleet prepared for humanity's first push beyond Sol. "Jump coordinates locked in, Admiral," his executive officer reported. "All vessels report phase shift drives at optimal capacity." We nodded, studying the tactical display where 67 warships, a force unimaginable half a year ago, awaited his command. Each vessel incorporated technology that violated what humans had once considered immutable laws of physics. "Signal all ships," Wei ordered. "Execute jump." Space folded around the fleet as reality itself seemed to bend. The stars blurred and stretched before, resolving into an unfamiliar pattern. They had arrived at Proxima Centauri, humanity's first extrasolar colony, which had mysteriously gone silent decades earlier. "Contact," announced his tactical officer. "Multiple Concorde installations detected on the planetary surface. Orbital defenses activating." "Launch reconnaissance drones," Wei ordered. "I want to know what we're dealing with before." He was interrupted by an urgent communication from the fleet's lead scout vessel. "Admiral, we're detecting human life signs on the surface, thousands of them. But something's wrong with the readings. Genetic anomalies, significant deviation from baseline human markers." Wei's eyes narrowed. "Show me." Eleanor Chen studied the holographic display with growing horror as data streamed in from the captured Concorde research facility on Proxima B laboratory records, medical files, genetic sequencing data, all focusing on human test subjects. They've been experimenting on them for generations, Dr. Takamoto explained, his thin frame trembling with a mix of exhaustion and rage. The Japanese xenobiologist had been rescued from an isolation cell deep within the facility. The Concorde has been trying to isolate and neutralize what they call the violence gens, genetic markers they believe make humans uniquely dangerous. "These people," Eleanor said, gesturing to the thousands of humans now being evacuated to Wei's fleet, "they're colonists. Descendants of the original Proxima mission," Takamoto confirmed. "The Concorde intercepted them nearly a century ago. Those not used for experimentation were placed in controlled habitats, primitive farming communities where they could be studied under various conditions." Eleanor moved through rows of medical pods where the most severely modified humans were being treated. Some had atrophied limbs, others displayed neural modification scars. Children with unnaturally docile expressions stared vacantly at their rescuers. "This isn't the only site," Takamoto said quietly. "According to their databases, there are at least 17 human populations being kept throughout Concorde territory. Some were captured from early exploratory missions. Others," he hesitated. "Others what?" Eleanor pressed. "Were already there when the Concorde formed. Hidden enclaves of humans who survived whatever cataclysm ended our first interstellar civilization." Eleanor's communication device chimed. Admiral Wei's face appeared, his expression grim. "Dr. Chen, you need to see this. We've accessed their primary command center." The Concord commander's chamber was opulent compared to the sterile hallways of the rest of the facility. Wei stood before a large display showing a star map with highlighted sectors. "Watch," he said as Eleanor entered. The display activated, showing historical footage of what appeared to be a space battle, but on a scale that defied comprehension. Ships the size of small moons exchanged fire across a backdrop of stars, their weapons tearing holes in space itself. At the center of the conflict, a vessel bearing unmistakably human design elements unleashed a weapon that caused an entire star system to collapse in on itself. "This is Concord propaganda," Eleanor said. "It has to be." "Perhaps," Wei acknowledged. "But explain this." He gestured to a sealed container in the center of the room. Inside floated what appeared to be a perfectly preserved human brain, connected to an intricate network of machinery. Was Dr. Eliza Kaminsky, mission commander of the Europa Initiative, Wei said quietly. "She disappeared 60 years ago while investigating anomalous signals from this system. They'd been keeping her alive." "As what? A prisoner?" Eleanor asked, horrified. "Worse," Wei replied. "According to their logs, she's a blueprint. They've been studying her neural pathways, mapping the human brain's capacity for violence and creativity. They're terrified of us, Dr. Chen. Not just because of what our ancestors did, but because of what we might become again." Eleanor approached the container, placing her hand against its surface. "We're taking her home, along with everyone else we can find." Wei agreed, his voice hardening. "This ends now." The Concord wanted to prevent the rise of the World Breakers. Instead, they ensured it. As they spoke, Kaminsky's neural readings spiked. Despite her disembodied state, sensors indicated increased activity in regions associated with recognition and memory. Somewhere in what remained of her consciousness, she recognized her own kind had finally returned. The procedure has never been tested on modern humans, Eleanor warned, her reflection distorted in the curved glass of the memory activation chamber. The archive data suggests a 30% chance of permanent neural damage. Admiral Wei stood before the chamber, already dressed in the neural interface suit. Behind them, in the secure laboratory aboard the UES Retribution, medical staff monitored equipment they barely understood. "The Concord is regrouping," Wei replied. "We've liberated 4 human populations, but their main fleet is mobilizing. We need more than technological advantages. We need the tactical knowledge that died with our ancestors." Eleanor nodded reluctantly. Over the past month, she had decoded the most sensitive section of the archive, what humanity's ancestors called the inheritance protocol. Not mere historical records or technological schematics, but a method to activate ancestral memories encoded within human DNA itself. The process will identify your closest genetic match from the archived consciousness imprints, she explained. The most compatible ancestral mind will be temporarily awakened within your own consciousness. "And if we're not compatible?" Wei asked. Eleanor met his gaze. "Then your mind tears itself apart trying to integrate 2 distinct personalities." Wei stepped into the chamber without further comment. As the door sealed, Eleanor activated the sequence, watching as luminescent fluid filled the chamber, enveloping Wei's body in a glowing cocoon. "Neural pathways mapping," announced the system's eye. "Genetic sequence identified. Compatibility match, 89.7%. Initiating convergence with archived consciousness. Fleet Admiral Tian Guo, 3rd Expansion Fleet." Wei's body convulsed, his back arching as electrical impulses danced across the surface of the fluid. On the monitoring displays, his brain activity spiked to nearly twice normal human levels. "Pull him out," shouted Dr. Levine, the chief medical officer. "We can't," Eleanor replied, her knuckles white, as she gripped the console. "Not until the integration completes or fails." After 3 agonizing minutes, Wei's vital signs stabilized. The fluid drained from the chamber, leaving him slumped against the glass. When his eyes opened, something had changed in them, a depth that hadn't existed before, as if he was seeing both the present and the distant past simultaneously. "Admiral," Eleanor called through the intercom. "Can you hear me?" We looked at his hands, flexing them experimentally. When he spoke, his voice carried the same tone but with subtle differences in cadence and emphasis. "I hear you, Dr. Chen," he replied. "And I remember you, though we have never met. I remember worlds you have never seen, stars that burned out millennia before your birth." He looked up, his gaze unnervingly focused. "I remember the war. All of it." Eleanor sat across from Wei in his private quarters, recording his testimony. 6 hours had passed since the procedure, and Wei's consciousness now coexisted with that of Admiral Tian Guo, a military commander who had lived and died over 10,000 years ago. "We did not start the conflict," Wei/Guo explained. "Humanity had expanded peacefully for 3 centuries, establishing colonies across 500 star systems. We encountered 12 distinct intelligent species, formed alliances, established trade networks." "What changed?" Eleanor asked. "Fear," he replied simply. "As humans adapted to different planetary conditions, our rate of technological advancement accelerated. Several species, the progenitors of what you now call the Concord, became convinced we would eventually dominate the galaxy. They struck first, using engineered pathogens against our outer colonies." Wei's expression darkened with 10,000-year-old rage. "They murdered 6 billion humans in the first attack. Children, families, entire worlds reduced to morgues. And we retaliated," Eleanor provided. "With terrible efficiency," Wei confirmed. "Human military doctrine evolved beyond anything our enemies could anticipate. We didn't simply wage war, we reinvented it with each engagement." A distant look crossed his face. "The weapons we created, they violated the fundamental laws of reality itself." Eleanor struggled to reconcile this history with humanity's current state. "But if we were so advanced, why did we regress? Why hide our technology and devolve our civilization?" Wei's expression changed to one of profound exhaustion, not his own, but Guo's ancient weariness. "Because we discovered something worse than genocide, something feeding on the conflict itself." He activated a holographic display showing what appeared to be quantum-level readings of neural patterns. "We called it the Void Collective, an entity existing in the spaces between thoughts, between moments of consciousness. It had been manipulating sentient species for millions of years, driving them to destroy each other." "An intelligence without physical form," Eleanor whispered. "Precisely. It consumed the psychic energy generated by fear, hatred, and death on massive scales." Wei's hands trembled slightly. "When we discovered its influence, we realized the entire war had been orchestrated. Both sides manipulated to maximize suffering. So our ancestors hid," Eleanor concluded, "buried their technology, deliberately regressed their own species, and waited." "Not just waited," Wei corrected. "They implemented a multi-millennium genetic adaptation program. The Void Collective could predict and influence any intelligence it understood. So humanity's only hope was to become something unpredictable through natural evolution." Eleanor felt a chill. "And now we've reawakened, right on schedule." "Yes," Wei nodded, his eyes reflecting stars that had died before recorded history began. "But the question remains, did we evolve enough to survive what's coming?" The fleet emerged from phase space into absolute darkness. No stars, no ambient radiation, nothing but perfect, endless void surrounding them. "Position confirmed," announced the navigator aboard the UES Retribution. "We've reached the coordinates designated as the Morning Fields." Admiral Wei stood motionless on the command deck, his consciousness partially submerged in Guo's ancient memories. He knew this place, though he had never been here before. This pocket of engineered spacetime. hidden between the galaxies where no sensors would ever detect it. "Forward illumination," he ordered. Massive spotlights activated on the fleet's vanguard ships, their beams extending into the darkness before suddenly striking something massive. As more lights joined, the object resolved into view. The colossal prow of a warship, unlike anything humanity had constructed in 10,000 years. Behind it, revealed one by one as the lights swept outward, were thousands more. The cosmos-crushing Armada, Y whispered. The last fleet. Dr. Takamoto approached, his eyes wide as he studied the readings. "There's no power signature. They're completely dormant." "They were meant to be," Y replied. "The final contingency, hidden where the Void Collective could never find them." He turned to Eleanor. "Begin the activation sequence." Eleanor interfaced with the command systems, transmitting the codes recovered from the archive. For several minutes, nothing happened. Then, a ripple of energy passed through the pocket dimension as ancient reactors began powering up, one by one. "Multiple contacts," shouted the tactical officer suddenly. "Concord vessels breaching the dimensional barrier. They followed us." On the Concord flagship, Admiral Zexthal watched as his fleet penetrated the hidden pocket dimension. The human vessels appeared tiny against the backdrop of what lay before them. Thousands of ancient warships slowly awakening from millennial slumber. "So the legends were true," he hissed to his executive officer. "The final armada of the destroyer civilization. We cannot allow them to reactivate those vessels," the executive officer replied. "Our entire fleet must strike now, while the human forces are vulnerable." Zexthal's inner eyelids flickered in contemplation. "Strange, is it not, that our ancestors spoke of the human homeworld's location with such certainty, yet none of our expeditions found them until mere centuries ago." "The humans were cunning," the executive officer offered. "They hid themselves well. Or something hid them from us," Zexthal murmured. "Launch all attack craft. Target their command vessel first." The battle erupted with furious intensity as Concord forces struck at Way's fleet. The human vessels, though advanced by modern standards, were outmatched by the sheer number of Concord warships pouring through the dimensional breach. "Shields at 40%, called out Way's tactical officer as another volley struck the retribution. "We can't hold them off and complete the Armada activation sequence simultaneously." Eleanor worked frantically at the command interface, trying to accelerate the ancient warship's awakening protocols. "There's too much security encryption. The systems recognize our genetic signature but require additional authentication." "We're losing ships," Way announced grimly as the tactical display showed 3 human vessels blinking out of existence. "Divert all power to forward shields and prepare tow." He was interrupted by Eleanor's sudden gasp. She had collapsed to her knees, blood trickling from her nose as her eyes rolled back in her head. "Medical team to the bridge," Way shouted, rushing to her side. "No," Eleanor whispered, her voice strangely distant. "It's happening, just like at Europa." Her consciousness was expanding beyond her physical form, connecting directly with the neural interfaces of the ancient fleet. The genetic memory procedure she had undergone had activated something unexpected, psychic abilities that had remained dormant in human DNA for millennia. Through Eleanor's eyes, reality shifted. She could see the energy flows of the pocket dimension, the quantum states of the Armada systems, the thought patterns of every being in the battle. With a mental command that felt as natural as breathing, she bypassed all security protocols at once. Throughout the morning fields, ancient warships blazed to life. Weapon systems that could tear apart stars powered up as artificial intelligences awakened, immediately recognizing the threat and deploying to protect their human creators. On the command deck, Eleanor's body floated several inches above the floor, surrounded by crackling energy as she became the living conduit between humanity past and present. Her voice, when she spoke, carried harmonics no human throat could produce. Authentication accepted. Command authority recognized. Genetic lineage of Chief Architect Maya Chen confirmed. The cosmos-crushing Armada stands ready to fulfill its final duty. Wei watched in awe as the first wave of ancient vessels moved into formation, their sleek, predatory designs making even the most advanced human and Concord ships look primitive by comparison. "Eleanor," he called cautiously, her glowing eyes turned toward him. "I am here, Admiral, and I remember everything now." The interrogation chamber aboard the UES Retribution hummed with energy-dampening fields as Admiral Wei studied their prisoner. Sub-Commander Nexvas, third in the Concord hierarchy, sat motionless except for the occasional flicker of inner eyelids across reptilian eyes. "You've lost 6 star systems in 14 days, Wei stated flatly. "Your defensive lines are collapsing. The Armada will reach your core worlds within a week." The Concord commander's scales rippled in what might have been resignation. "You believe this is victory, human. It is merely the next phase in a cycle older than both our civilizations." Wei leaned forward. "Explain." "We are all puppets," Nexvaz said softly, "dancing on strings we cannot see, pulled by hands we cannot comprehend." A door slid open as Eleanor entered, her movements unnaturally fluid since her transformation at the morning fields. The alien recoiled visibly. "You sense it, don't you?" Eleanor said. "The difference in me." "Abomination," Nexvaz hissed. "The architects warned this would happen if humans ever reawakened." Eleanor placed a data crystal on the table. "We found this in your ship's secure archives. It contains records dating back thousands of years. Sensor data, neural scans, command logs." "Impossible," the alien commander whispered. "Those records are encrypted beyond." "Nothing is beyond me now," Eleanor interrupted, her voice resonating strangely. "I've seen the shadow in your species' collective consciousness, the same shadow that exists in ours. The entity your ancestors called Thought That Feasts." Nexvaz went completely still. "You know." "The Void Collective," Wei confirmed. "It's been manipulating both our civilizations for millennia." "Not just manipulating," Eleanor corrected. "Feeding." "The collective exists in the quantum substrate of consciousness itself. It cannot directly influence physical reality, but it can suggest, plant ideas, nurture fears. It harvests the psychic energy generated by conflict and suffering." "We've known of its existence for centuries," Nexvaz admitted, scales flattening in distress. "Some among us can sense its influence, but resistance is difficult. It finds the darkest impulses in our minds and amplifies them. The more we fight against it, the more it turns our resistance into paranoia and hatred." Wei exchanged glances with Eleanor. "Why didn't you warn us?" A sound emerged from the alien's throat, something between laughter and despair. "We tried. Every diplomatic mission we sent to primitive human worlds disappeared without trace. Eventually we concluded that you were already its puppets, being cultivated as its next army. Or something prevented contact," Eleanor suggested. "Something protecting humanity while we evolved." Wei's communication device chimed urgently. "Admiral, we're detecting unusual activity across all Concord communication channels. Some sort of broadcast override." "It's time," Eleanor said with sudden certainty. "Transmit the evidence. All of it. To both fleets, to every world within range." Throughout human and Concord space, the transmission penetrated all communication networks simultaneously. The evidence was irrefutable. Ancient records, neural pattern analyses, historical footage digitally enhanced to reveal subtle manipulations of leaders on both sides. The reaction was immediate and violent. On 3 Concord worlds, civil unrest erupted as populations divided between those who accepted the truth and those too deeply influenced to break free. Within the Concord fleet, 5 capital ships suddenly turned their weapons on their allies, their commanders refusing to acknowledge the evidence. Aboard the flagship of the Xindi Protectorate, the eldest of the Concord species, Grand Minister Kolnar watched the transmission with ancient eyes. "So it's true," he murmured to his advisors. "The humans were not the aggressors we believed them to be." "What do we do?" asked his chief strategist. The Grand Minister's gaze hardened. Contact the human fleet. Request immediate cessation of hostilities and diplomatic talks. And if they refuse? They won't, Kolnar replied. Not if they truly understand what we face. On Earth, Eleanor's transmission sparked global chaos. Religious leaders proclaimed the end times. Military authorities struggled to maintain order. In the United Nations emergency session, delegates shouted accusations of treason and surrender. This is madness, the Russian representative proclaimed. We are winning this war. Why would we stop now? Admiral Wei, attending via hologram from the Retribution, addressed the assembly. Because this isn't our war. It never was. We've been manipulated for millennia, guided into conflict to feed an entity that thrives on suffering. Where is your proof? Demanded the Chinese ambassador. It's in your own minds, Wei replied. The unexplained hatred you feel toward species you've never met. The dreams of apocalyptic conflict that have plagued humanity since our earliest records. The Void Collective has been whispering to us for thousands of years, preparing us for this moment. And what happens if we refuse this peace offer? Asked the American president. Wei's expression darkened. Then we become exactly what the Concord feared, world breakers, star killers. And when we've destroyed everything, the collective will move on to feed on other species in other galaxies, while we're left with nothing but ashes. Reality itself seemed to warp as the Void Collective manifested in physical space. What began as distortions in sensor readings had evolved into something visible, a fleet of impossible geometries, ships that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Their hulls shifted between states of matter, sometimes solid, sometimes merely suggested by patterns of darkness against the stars. Admiral Wei stood on the command deck of the Retribution, watching as the combined human Concord fleet moved into defensive formation. The Alliance, barely 2 weeks old, was holding despite millennia of engineered hatred. The Collective's vessels are crewed by at least 7 distinct species, reported his tactical officer, including 3 we believed extinct. Puppets, Wei said grimly. Civilizations completely subsumed by the Collective's influence. Grand Minister Kolnar's holographic image appeared beside him, the ancient Cindy's expression solemn. The corrupted fleet is targeting the Rigel system first. 8 billion lives in its path. We'll hold them there, Wei promised, feeling Admiral Go's strategic knowledge surging through his consciousness. Deploy the Armada in crescent formation with Concord heavy carriers providing rear support. As orders transmitted across the fleet, Eleanor entered the command deck. Since fully embracing her connection to the ancient technologies, she had become something neither fully human nor machine, a hybrid consciousness existing partially in quantum states that allowed her to process information at unprecedented speeds. The Archive's final weapon is ready, she announced, her voice carrying harmonic undertones. But the cost will be higher than we anticipated. Wei turned to her. Explain. The weapon isn't a device, Eleanor replied. It's a process, a cascading psychic disruption that will sever the Collective's influence permanently. But it requires amplification through human neural networks. You're talking about using people as conduits, Wei said, understanding immediately. Eleanor nodded. Every human with activated genetic memory will become part of the transmission. The unique architecture of our evolved brains is the only medium capable of generating the countervailing pattern. How many will survive? Eleanor met his gaze. Few, if any. The neural load is beyond what biological systems were designed to handle. Wei was silent for a moment. Do we have a choice? None, she replied. If the Collective isn't stopped here, it will continue consuming civilizations across multiple galaxies for millennia to come. The interrogation chamber aboard the UES Retribution hummed with energy-dampening fields as Admiral Wei studied their prisoner. Sub-Commander Nexvaz, third in the Concord hierarchy, sat motionless except for the occasional flicker of inner eyelids across reptilian eyes. You've lost 6 star systems in 14 days, Wei stated flatly. Your defensive lines are collapsing. The Armada will reach your core worlds within a week. The Concord commander's scales rippled in what might have been resignation. You believe this is victory, human. It is merely the next phase in a cycle older than both our civilizations. We leaned forward. Explain. We are all puppets, Nexvaz said softly, dancing on strings we cannot see, pulled by hands we cannot comprehend. A door slid open as Eleanor entered, her movements unnaturally fluid since her transformation at the morning fields. The alien recoiled visibly. You sense it, don't you? Eleanor said. The difference in me. Abomination. Nexvaz hissed. The architects warned this would happen if humans ever reawakened. Eleanor placed a data crystal on the table. We found this in your ship's secure archives. It contains records dating back thousands of years. Sensor data, neural scans, command logs. Impossible, the alien commander whispered. Those records are encrypted beyond. Nothing is beyond me now. Eleanor interrupted, her voice resonating strangely. I've seen the shadow in your species' collective consciousness, the same shadow that exists in ours. The entity your ancestors called thought that feasts. Nexvaz went completely still. You know, the Void Collective, Wei confirmed. It's been manipulating both our civilizations for millennia. Not just manipulating, Eleanor corrected. Feeding. The collective exists in the quantum substrate of consciousness itself. It cannot directly influence physical reality, but it can suggest, plant ideas, nurture fears. It harvests the psychic inner.